The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
I am Emily Swallow, also known as the Armorer on The Mandalorian. And I'm just giving a little shout out to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast because this is the way.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 93.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Just right off the bat, of course, please share the podcast on your favorite social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you use. That way we can be seen by more people, especially those who would be interested in listening to us. And if you have time, we would really appreciate you leaving a review for us, especially in Apple Podcasts, because that also gets us seen by more people, so people can join in the fun and our take on everything Star Wars. Today we are discussing the first episode of the Star Wars Visions anime anthology, and this one is titled The Duel. Joining me tonight on the panel are Thomas and Herho.
It's good to be here.
It is very good to have you on tonight, Thomas.
He says that because I'm a junkie. He knows I'm an anime and classic Japanese film junkie. So
yes,
this is my thing right here. Yeah,
we are gonna sit at the feet of your wisdom tonight. And second up this evening is Angela Ciolana.
Hello, everyone. I'm not a junkie, but maybe just like in the middle of these two guys. So
perfect.
It was definitely some good Star Wars.
Yes,
right?
yes. It was excellent Star Wars. Yes. Absolutely.
But before we jump into that, I did want to just mention our Ham Solo segment. And this week is brought to you by Babu Freak. And Mike Creevy had put Babu Freak as his deli order this week. I dare not even try to impersonate him, so please don't ask. Just a reminder, of course, listeners, if you would like to be featured in our Ham Solo segment, that's where you put a fun random Star Wars name on a food order, coffee order, Star Wars in daily life, how it kind of pops out unexpectedly, perhaps. We would love to hear your stories or your encounters with that. And if you use the hashtag Ham Solo on Twitter, we will collect those and share those on the podcast. Or you can email us, starwars@sqpn.com, and we would be happy to share those fun random encounters of Star Wars in daily life. So we are going to talk Visions. And so first, before we get into the Duel, I did want to kind of talk briefly about the overall kind of Visions anthology. And so Disney has done something that I wasn't expecting, and I still don't know how I feel about it, but they released all the episodes at once. And that is like, on one hand, it's really cool, but on the other hand, like, you can just binge it all, and then you're kind of I like to have these spaced out a bit more. So I'm actually intentionally waiting and watching one per week. And so I was curious how you guys were approaching the anthology series.
Yeah, I'm not going to burn them all at once. And after watching this one, my kids were smitten. My kids were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool!" And unanimously from the older ones, it's Dad, seriously, you need to watch more anime with us. And so, I will admit, that's something that I've been a little bit behind on. We've watched a lot of Miyazaki stuff, but they haven't watched a lot of the other animes that I think are really influential, especially not the series, just mostly because I can't find them anywhere reliable to watch. So I have to either purchase them or, try and rent them from somewhere, which is really challenging.
Yeah, that's true. I'm in the same boat. I decided to just watch one per week because I just have to spread out the goodness. And it's also a practical reason because we're going to be discussing one per week on this show. So I don't want to get things all mixed up. It's a focused approach. And I was also going to ask Father and Thomas if you all watched in English or in Japanese.
Ooh.
Because I chose, Disney Plus had my language as English, right? Obviously. So I when I first started it, I was hearing it in English and I was like, no, I want to hear it in the original. So I changed it to Japanese and I was watching with subtitles. So I was just curious how y'all decided to watch it.
I didn't realize that was an option. Holy cow. I am going back to change that right after this. I'm going to go switch that. That's how I would prefer to have watched it now.
And it's interesting because that's how it was originally created. And I didn't even think about that being an option. I always watch it with the subtitles on because it just helps me make sure that I don't miss something, especially as I'm preparing for the podcast. So it would have been a natural progression to just listen to it in the original language. I will point out, however, that there are a few voice actors on the English cast. I didn't know any of them in the Duel, but there are a few coming up. For example, Christopher Sean, who does the voice of in Resistance, the cartoon, the kid. And I'm blanking on Kaz. I forget.
Kaz. Yeah, Kaz. I think.
So he's in one of them, and so is Mark Thompson, who does the narration on a lot of audiobooks for Star Wars. And so I really want to hear them. What?
Yeah, Lucy Liu was in this one.
Okay, and I'm not.
Oh wow.
I don't know that name.
You don't know Lucy Liu? Oh.
No.
you would know. You would know her if you saw her.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would totally be like, oh yeah, that's that one. Yeah.
I'll have to Google that. So
she was in Kill Bill and
Okay. Maybe it's one of those things that I need to watch it once in English and once in Japanese, so I can get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And maybe I should have started with this question rather than waiting till now, but do you both think that doing a Japanese style anime works for Star Wars? I think I know the answer, but
yes. And categorically yes. That's going to lead us into a lot of our discussion about this because if you don't know, George Lucas based the entire Star Wars franchise on a Kurosawa film, an Akira Kurosawa film, which is Japanese samurai films that inspired the spaghetti western. So if you've ever seen like a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western, you've seen essentially the setup for what a Kurosawa film was, the Japanese samurai film that everybody would recognize as it. They were all black and white. The one that Lucas based Star Wars on was called The Hidden Fortress. And if you watch that movie, you see Star Wars. You see it opens up with the two droids having a fight, but they're humans in this case, and they're guys that are coming back from a war, and they're just like the goofball characters that don't really fit the seriousness of everything that's going on, but give us an in to the story that's being told. And all of the nobility samurai kind of feel to everything, the empire that's overriding local cultures, and it really is like Star Wars but with the original samurai stuff to it. And so that's the feel that this episode brings just from the very beginning. The first note that it strikes is like this panning down from the stars the way Star Wars does, but instead of going onto this alien planet, it goes onto a planet that we would recognize, and it's in black and white with the film grains moving on it. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and to add to that, there are some things that Kurosawa brought cinematically to just film in general that George Lucas adopted. One of the things is the use of motion in the camera. So for example, you'll have a long camera shot, and you'll have maybe a character off in the distance coming maybe towards the camera, and then sort of becoming a close up at that point, and then maybe the camera moves a little bit further and it becomes a mid shot. So you're getting all these different kinds of shots without a cut. That's one thing that Kurosawa did. And another thing that he did was to use movement to kind of make the edits a lot smoother, because Kurosawa edited his films as well as directed them. So he used movement of a character from one cut to another to really kind of create motion, so that in many ways you may not even realize that the shot has cut, but that it's focused on the character. So those are a couple of things. He also used like contrast to really sort of let you know what a character is feeling. So different ways that he kind of isolate a character, a lot of like crowd shots, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff cinematically that was also kind of incorporated into these. And I'm sure we'll see more, in the upcoming episodes of Visions as well.
Yeah, it was actually really cool, especially the way that in this one, the way that they used the black and white and the shots of color. That really highlighted certain things. Or I think the first time you see the Sith Lord, the bandit leader, like you see her eye, and her eye is red and the rest of her is black and white, and just super menacing and very, very appropriate. But before we jump into the duel, I did want to make a mention that one of the ways that I always kind of have in the back of my mind when I'm watching Star Wars is, where is this on the timeline? When does this take place? And I had to really resist the notion of trying to put it anywhere in particular. And in fact, the executive producer, James Waugh, was doing an interview, and he basically made mention, he's in referring to all of the Vision stories. He says, quote, "Some are less on the timeline than others. Some could very much fit within our timeline, but Visions as a whole is more of a celebration of Star Wars through this unique perspective, this unique form, this medium and culture. And that was really the intention," unquote. And so I had to kind of like let go of my need to just like figure out where in the timeline this was, because they mention in this one a Sith rebellion, and I'm like, ooh, is that like Old Republic or post Rise of Skywalker? But then you're like, I'm noticing like stormtrooper helmets that seem to look like, the First Order. And so I had to just kind of let that go and just say, okay, this is sort of kind of next to the Star Wars canon, if you will, and enjoy it for what it is, and not try to fit it in cinema or into the timeline somewhere.
That's my son asked, so who is this Ronin guy? Like, where does he fit? And I'm like, do we need to know? Is that necessary?
Some of us need to know.
Yeah.
But mentioning that, here's a fun thing that's coming. Apparently, we're not the only ones that need to know more about Ronin. They actually, Del Rey they're producing a novel that is going to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's coming out October 12th. So I mean, just in a couple weeks, and it is going to narrate this exact episode and expand on it. So. There is more about Ronin coming, but that's the only novel that I've heard of containing Visions stuff. So those of us who need to know more will learn more. So, okay, with that, let's jump into the duel itself. And of course, first of all, what do you guys think of this episode?
I guess I'll go first.
Go for
it. I watched it multiple times, and I got something different from each watch. At first, upon first watch, I was just like, wow, what did I see just now? Like, it was just so new, a new way to watch Star Wars. But then at the same time, there was a familiarity, with just the Japanese influence of Star Wars, like you were saying, Thomas. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of it, the connection, but also the newness. And just overall, very much appreciated the art and the overall intentionality of the Star Wars, the Vision's producer said that it's kind of like a love letter to Star Wars in this style. So I appreciated that very much.
Yes, the unanimous consensus in my living room after watching this the first time was this is the best Star Wars we've seen in decades. So which some of them aren't even that old. So this is the best Star Wars they've seen, period. We loved it. I loved it. I thought it was, as a Kurosawa fan, it was such a great homage to his work. But then by itself, it was such a great piece of Star Wars fiction. Like it hit all the right notes for a piece of Star Wars fiction. And then for anybody who's a fan of JoJo Siwa, this is the art group that did JoJo Siwa, so which is a very popular anime right now. So even if if you know any kids that are into JoJo Siwa and you want to get them into Star Wars, show them this because it very much fits that kind of strain of anime. When the Sith pulls off her hood and the hair just comes flowing out as this huge voluminous thing behind her, I was like, okay, that's where they came in. I was wondering how they were going to fit in their kind of style if they were just doing this Kurosawa throwback. And then one of the writer for this one is he did production development for one of my favorite animes, which is Outlaw Star. It came out in the late 90s. And so he did like the sci-fi development. So all of the newish sci-fi stuff you see in here, you can definitely see his influence in that. So like the umbrella saber thing was so awesome, and it's so much like fits the feel of that show too. So these are all of my favorite things just kind of put into a package and delivered to me. So yes, I loved it.
One of the things that I would add, I did really enjoy it. I did not expect it to be I expected there to be a Jedi in there, and the fact that there wasn't was surprising for me, which a good surprise. This was a really well done story. But one of the things that I would also mention is the music really caught my attention. Yes. There were I could tell there were some themes that were coming from like the First Order themes when the bandits arrived, but then like even in the actual duel itself, the music sort of intensified, and there was this vocal chord or the vocal chorus that was really, I mean, it was like sending chills down my spine in a good way, because it's like just super intense and just I tend to pick up on the music parts of it too, and for not knowing much of Kurosawa, I mean, I also really enjoyed it and appreciated what they did with it.
So you're gonna have to fix that. We're gonna have to get you to go watch the Kurosawa, because if you like those elements,
it was the drums, especially at the beginning, setting up the fight, the sounds of like that vocal portion. That's very Kurosawa, also.
And remind me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong. This story reflects, is it the Seven Samurai by Kurosawa?
It's three of his movies, all kind of wrapped up in one. So it's the Seven Samurai is definitely there, where that's all of the guys defending the village from this encroaching group. But then it's also there's a combo set of this one particular character that he has that's called Sanjuro. And it's Yojimbo and Sanjuro are the two movies that he's in, and he is a duelist. That's his thing, and he owes allegiance to no one, goes for whoever the highest bidder is, but still has a sense of the samurai honor in him. Like he really wants to be an honorable man. He just doesn't have anything that he has no anchor point for that, and so he goes and does service to people who pay him money as a samurai. But he's also this, loose cannon who can't really be trusted because you don't really know where he stands at any given time, which was so perfect, like for this character. It really fit that pull in.
Yeah, and in Yojimbo, he actually comes across this. It's kind of like a bar it's a, in the movie, but here it's a shopkeeper, so it's the same type of thing. You still get the beverage there.
Yep.
So I felt like that was a connection, and then also I felt like in actually one of Kurosawa's later is actually his Russian film in 1975. There's I have to remind myself how to say this, Dursu Uzala. But that one's about a trapper in a forest who has a very close connection to nature. And there's this particular scene where he's talking about a kettle that because of the use of the kettle in this episode, it really I saw the connection there as well. And I wondered if that was intentionally going back to that film or not. So there was a lot. I
don't doubt it. Yeah, there was a lot of Kurosawa.
And that's a pretty unique sort of image.
Yeah.
Fixing the droid by the time the kettle boils. Let's kind of jump into the actual kind of the story and the outline then. And one of the things that it starts off with is it kind of pans down to this unknown planet, and then there's these words that appear on the screen. Did you both pick up what that was?
It was the title of the show, right?
Yep. But it was in
Arabic.
In Arabic. Yep.
Yeah.
And I imagine
that's not Japanese.
Right. Well, my first thought was that it was Japanese, and then I had to look at it again, and it was the Duel in Arabic. And
the nerd in me. I could read it.
Yes. And we come across first Ronin and his droid. And I think his droid is someone we should probably talk about, even though, I mean, he's sort of already captured the imagination of people everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's an R5 droid technically, but
yes. R5D65, I think was his.
Yeah, I had his
sign.
Yeah, so, but he has a straw hat on, and that is just,
and he's got excellent sass. Like, it's wonderful sass.
Yes, high sass on the straw hat.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that I think this is like the very first. This is so Star Wars, like the lone person with their droid, like out there, on the planet, like exploring or just kind of making their way through the galaxy type of thing. That is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, but I want to say that's where Westerns, we get the connection to the Western because it's usually like a cowboy and his horse.
And yep.
Here we have the Force user and their droid. So
yeah, well, and it's interesting because like Kurosawa's films never had, like, the Ronin was always by himself. Like, it was very solo. So this is definitely a Star Wars-ism on it, or like a spaghetti Western pull into it as well. And it's the man and his dog, or the man and his horse. I love it though. Like, just the shot of them walking into this village at the very beginning is so great, because it's obviously an astromech droid, but we find very quickly that it's not just an astromech droid at all.
I felt he was like a mix of R2-D2 and Chopper from Rebels.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
especially when the Ugnaught was trying to fix him, and he was like, all of the little pieces were, all the little tools were popping out, and he was trying to push him back in.
Was he an Ugnaught or a Sullustan?
Oh, right.
I kept writing.
It was hard to tell.
Sullustan. Yeah,
I kept writing
Sullustan in my notes.
But
okay, maybe that's what it was,
or something. Yeah.
So yeah, so we do then meet the Sullustan shopkeeper fairly quickly, and he's kind of like Ronin's only friend in this village, even though he saves the entire village. And the peace is shattered by the arrival of this transport with all the bandits, and that was when it pans in on the inside of the transport, and you see the Sith Lord leader and the red eye, which was again just well done. And the story plays out of that the bandits begin to attack the village, and they we hear a little bit about the bandits. The Solistan seems to know that they're set up on the other side of the mountain, and they're remnants from the last war. And so that's again where my brain was like, well, what war?
Which war was it?
Okay, it was just a war that I don't need to concern myself with.
That's one of the things about samurai is like there were so many wars. You didn't really need to like put it in a place. There were just so many wars, and there were bandits after the wars. Right?
Yeah.
And then I think here it's good to talk about the art here too, because this isn't just 2D or 3D animation, and that's one of the things that this studio really prides themselves on, is the cell shaded style of blended animation, where it looks 2D sometimes, but it really is a lot of 3D work that's thrown in. And watching that scene, I especially like the scene where the troopers are rolling in on in the tank thing, and they're playing dice, and it has both feels very clearly. Like there's just it looks like a 2D image of them, or 2D animation of them sitting and playing dice, and then they stand up to walk out, and you're suddenly brought into this 3D world. And it was really awesome the way that those two things play together. Very cool artistry going on there.
So they begin their attack on the village, and they demand to talk to the chief, and the chief is a kid. Is that common in?
No, the chief wasn't a kid. So this was, and I love that my 4-year-old picked up on this.
Okay, well then he's smarter than me.
They zoom out.
Well, there was
he was
someone
sleeping.
sleeping.
The dad was laying in the bed like sick, and so he wasn't able. So that's the chief, and that's what he said. He said that's his dad, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is, and that's a lot. That really is a theme from a lot of Kurosawa films of like the parent being unable, or the parent being unable to do something, and so the kid takes on that mantle of responsibility and goes out and does whatever the thing is that parent needs done, and they also care for the parent as well, and on top of that, and there's a lot of times, especially in many Japanese movies, where there's a figure that is bedridden that has to be cared for, but the world still goes on. You can't just stop everything to care for him. You still have to keep doing your daily life and care for that person.
That makes,
a la Luke Skywalker, a la Memphis Nest.
Yeah. Yeah. All those themes kind of circulate, but that kind of makes a lot more sense in my head now, because I didn't pick up on that. So I'll have to.
Chief. I was so proud of my 4-year-old, like going, "That's his dad," and I'm like, "Yeah, buddy." Got it.
Yep. So the kid kind of stands up, and he's pretty brave. I mean, he's standing up to these bandits, and the bandits are demanding payment, and of course it leads into a fight. And actually the kid sort of prompts the guards to begin their attack on the bandits. And they do pretty well in the attack until the Sith Lord herself kind of appears and joins the battle. And that's where we see that umbrella lightsaber thing.
Yes.
It's really cool to note in high heels. Yes. So this was also kind of manga too, right?
It was very, it was Jojo Siwa. That was the Jojo Siwa moment right there. Like click, click. All right. But it's really important here to note too that all of the mercenaries were from somewhere else, because all the people in this village were human, but all of the mercenaries were there was a Tusken Raider, there was a Forlom droid. Yeah. And so they must have been hired in by these people. And that's where you get that seven samurai or Magnificent Seven reference.
Okay. Yeah. Wasn't there also, there was like an Imperial probe droid, but it was piloted by what looked like Sebulba's race?
A Doug.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was just the droid at first, and then afterwards you see him in the little pilot seat there. It's like, yes.
Right. The umbrella lightsaber thing, at least in the Star Wars universe, it made me think of the Inquisitors in Rebels, who had their they could float because they could twirl their lightsabers.
Helicopter.
Yeah. The helicopter thing. So that didn't throw me as much as it might have otherwise.
Yeah.
And the poor droid is hit by one of the stray bolts from the attack. So that's where Ronin has the shopkeeper fix him by the time that pot of kettle boils. And at this point, we should talk about the Sith Lord. I pulled some information on her from StarWars.com, and Thomas, I'm sure you can add more to this, but this is again, I think one of either the producer or the writer. I'm forgetting who said this, but he referred to her as a homage to the Japanese tradition of female samurai warriors of feudal Japan called Onimusha. I don't know.
Onimusha.
Okay. The Sith bandit leader from the Duel is a cool and cunning assassin reminiscent of the famous female warrior from Japanese cinema in the 70s, Lady Snowblood. So
cool.
Yeah, I can't really add anything, but except for to maybe go check that out. And
no, that's neat. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, I can definitely see that being a throw to the 70s style of the female samurai. And yeah, that's not something that you see in Kurosawa's films really at all. Kurosawa's films were very traditional in their presentation. They did have a little bit of outside presentation of like who a samurai might be, but that was not uncommon even in the Tales of Samurai, because there were several swordsmen that are very highly revered as master duelists that were not born nobility, that weren't samurai in the traditional sense of like landowners, knights kind of thing. Musashi, Miyamoto Musashi is the one that comes to mind most readily for that. But yeah, that I like the fact that she was very much in command of everybody that she was in charge of.
Yep.
And was incredibly intimidating. And the way that they set her against that Trandoshan leader, with like 3 lines of dialogue, they set both of those characters up so well. And then to make the 4-LOM droid, like, or I think it was a 4-LOM droid, but the droid like really ticked off when he dies. And all of that characterization is done in such a short amount of time, and it was done so well. I loved it. Really, really good scene there.
Yeah, on the Japanese voice track, the voice actor for that character, the Sith, was very menacing, very like kind of grovelly voice. She kind of gave off a sense of like real disgust with all of the the bandits that failed at their job, and just looking down on every single person that she came in contact with. So it was great.
A true Sith Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was also mentioned on StarWars.com, and connecting it more to the Star Wars universe, they said that the Sith bandit leader is a fresh take on a classic Sith villain expressed through dynamic action and fighting sequences not seen perhaps since Darth Maul faced Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace. So she is definitely meant to kind of encapsulate that sort of a Sith villain, and she does it really well. So she does take out the Trandoshan and the droid, and Ronin makes his appearance to come and confront her.
Walking amidst all the chaos, everything going on around him, just calmly moving through the street.
Oh, but I think what we know about him is essentially that he was a Sith. So I think even he's, at least in the lead up to the novel, I think he's referred to as a former Sith. So he's the lone character, but he does have the red lightsaber. But he waits for her to attack him,
right?
Which
is important.
Yeah,
yeah. I think her line to him is that he's a coward. And I thought, watching it a second time, that was such an awesome move on their part, because she's not calling him a coward. Like you could interpret it as he pulls the droid up to try and hit her, and that's his dirty fighting, and so she calls him a coward for that. But it's that he waited. He didn't come in and just start fighting her. He waited for her to attack first, and that's why she calls him a coward, because she's like, you're just chicken. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess, well, maybe we can talk about his character a little bit, because I had to kind of like go back to the history of the samurai a little bit. It's really fascinating. If you're not familiar with samurai movies or like Japanese culture at all, like I would suggest, as we're going through Visions, to really, maybe watch a documentary or something on YouTube, to try to, get a little bit into the culture, because yeah, like you kind of alluded to, Thomas, that the samurai were the ruling class of Japan, feudal Japan, and that's how people gain power, was to to win in war. So the idea of the Ronin is a samurai who has lost their master one way or another, whether that master has died or whether that master no longer gives his favor to the samurai, and so he loses his master. And what a samurai was supposed to do when that happened is that they were supposed to kill themselves in this ritual. And so if you did not do that, then you were a Ronin, you were a wandering warrior. And so the interesting comment at the beginning that the shopkeeper makes, he says, "Oh, your master must be so generous because you get to travel, it looks like you're just traveling, everywhere you want to go." But in reality, he is Ronin, so he doesn't have a master. And so I think that's kind of important, kind of in the Star Wars terminology, that this person does not have a master, in a sense of maybe he is his own master, and he just the way that he's using the Force, like you guys were talking about, that he doesn't use it for attack. He seems to be using it for defense, and he also didn't care about the bandits until the Sith showed up. So it seems like he has maybe he had some kind of grudge with his Sith master, or just the Sith in general. And that is very, Darth Maul, that he decided to leave the Sith and just do his own thing. So yeah, I just found that combination of the Japanese history with Star Wars to be really interesting.
Yeah. And then if you connect it to what happens at the end of the episode, where he pulls the kyber crystal out of her lightsaber and reveals that he's been collecting those red kyber crystals. So he's got some beef with the Sith for sure.
And that note, because Grievous did that. Grievous did a very similar kind of thing, right, where he collected lightsabers, but they were trophies for him. And the thing to remember about Sith lightsabers, this is where you go really deep in the Star Wars lore. The Sith the lightsaber crystals for Sith lightsabers are created. They aren't found and molded the way that a Jedi's is. They are like the Sith imbues all of their hate into this synthetic thing. And that's why Sith lightsabers are always red. There's not an exception to the fact that Sith lightsabers are red. Mostly.
Right.
I think is that still canon? Because I remember something about bleeding crystals.
Well, isn't I'm pretty sure that was in the Ahsoka novel that they explain that, where the Sith would bend the kyber crystal to their will, and it would. I don't remember if they used the terminology of bleeding or not, but they very well could have. But there's something there where they're forcing the kyber crystal to their will in a way that is unnatural, and that's why it's red.
It produces this red blade, and so that's why. And so when he's taking these things, it's much more personal than just collecting trophies. Like you've collected some piece of this person's soul almost.
Right. Well, and if it was just collecting trophies, he wouldn't have given it back to the chief or the chief's kid as sort of a amulet to ward off evil.
Right.
So, you know, it for him, it wasn't a trophy to add to the collection, but yeah, there was something much more meaningful behind it. But before they get to that point, they have to fight first. And so that's, of course, the duel. That's where the prominent part of this episode takes place, which was a very fun to watch duel. So first of all, Ronin, I was impressed with his ability to use the Force to stop her lightsaber from striking him down. So that was cool, kind of point number one. But then the way that they have the whole, he takes his lightsaber out of sort of it's like a sheath that a sword would be in versus just hanging your lightsaber on your belt. And I have to give props to the sound design for that, because that was really cool.
It's a great sound.
Yeah. I mean, because a lightsaber doesn't need a sheath, but maybe this one does, like, yeah, it was really cool. So yeah, and then of course they fight, and they move out onto this kind of fallen tree trunk over a river, and she severs it, so they're floating on the river and towards a waterfall. And for me, this very much conjured images of Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting on Mustafar.
Yeah.
Except for lava instead of a river. So they continue to fight, and the shopkeeper, of course, is trying to fix his droid. And at one point, Ronin finally puts away his lightsaber, and the Sith Lord is trying to tell him to throw his lightsaber down and win this battle. And Ronin uses his communicator button on his wrist once his droid is fixed to send his droid into action. And I
think it was waiting. It needed to move.
Yeah.
And the kettle, again, like, it just seems like such a simple thing, but what it does, whether you realize it or not, is it creates this sense of urgency, because he starts off by saying, you've got to get this done by the time this kettle boils over. And the fact that it's almost like a timekeeping mechanism, and it also reflects like how the action and the tension builds, and then finally it gets to that point where the steam comes up. So that's a really excellent use of a seemingly, just an ordinary object, but it's creating this, it's adding to the story and to the storytelling.
Yeah, it was really, really well done. The droid, and it reminded me of R2-D2 when he like comes in and saves the day in the movies, and so very Star Wars. And
were those whistling birds that he used?
That's a good question. They would fit. They looked like them, and they acted like them. They looked a bit bigger.
That's tropey Japanese anime stuff, though. Yeah. Like the missiles that go everywhere and like hit everything. That's completely like Robotech, Gundam, that whole string of things. So that's more, the whistling birds was more stolen from that kind of stuff than this from the from the Mandalorian.
They just continue to reuse these things, which is great.
Oh yeah, I'm fine with it.
They're so cool.
Yeah, so the R5 unit takes out the bandits who have captured the villagers, and also throws an explosive at the Sith Lord, but doesn't take her out. And the fight continues, and Ronin is knocked off the waterfall, and he falls down, and he climbs behind the waterfall. And the Sith Lord follows and is kind of gets in front of the waterfall and uses that log to clear the water in front of her, and she sees this lightsaber in the distance and assumes it's Ronin and tries to attack it, and hits, or just strikes down a statue instead who is holding a lightsaber, thus allowing Ronin to kill her.
Yes. And there's something that I want to say about this, because at first, the first time I watched it, I didn't realize what she was doing with the log, that she was creating a space so she didn't have to go through the water. But once I saw that she did that, I connected that to when you go to Japan and you visit a little shrine or temple, there is a ritual cleansing that you must do. And if you're not like familiar with like the Japanese religious situation, basically is that most people are not religious in Japan. But the Shinto you can call it a religion, but I think a lot of the people who practice Shinto, even priests, would say it's not a religion. But the idea is that what you do is much more important than what you believe. And so the act of going to the temple and performing the rituals as you should is very important. And so the idea that she cleared a space so she didn't have to go through the water before entering this temple kind of shows she did not purify herself before entering into the temple, but he had already gone through the water.
Yeah.
And so I thought of that as like he was purified before he entered into that temple. So I thought that was kind of a cool little religious connection too.
You could also kind of, not to stretch the analogy too far, but I mean, you make the analogy of baptism there too, of Ronin. Right. Ronin went through the water and she did not. And I imagine, is temples behind waterfalls, is that also a common thing that you would see in Japanese culture?
Wayside temples are pretty common. So it's cool.
I wouldn't
like
say
it's
necessarily
visually
behind
cool.
a waterfall, but yeah. But water is always part of the temple ritual.
Yeah, because I thought that was cool. I love that whole idea of, everybody kind of wants to go behind a waterfall and find a temple. So
it wouldn't be unheard of. Like it's not. I wouldn't say that it's common, but it's definitely not like completely out of the question to have a very serene, natural place that's been turned into a worship spot.
Yeah, and that would make sense. It's close enough to the village, but also far enough away that it's removed and isolated. So, yeah, the episode concludes with Ronin going back to the village and gives the shopkeeper the umbrella lightsaber device for compensation, and the chief's kid assumes Ronin is a Jedi Knight because of his humility or his modesty and his he protected the village. And they all kind of recognize him as actually a Sith when he uses his lightsaber to destroy her lightsaber and remove the kyber crystal. And then he gives the chief's kid the kyber crystal as sort of a token for what happened and what transpired, and told him it wards off evil. And then he and his faithful droid leave the village.
Right off into the sunset.
Yeah. So we've already kind of talked about that. And like I said, with the novel that's coming, I think it's going to expand on what happens next in the story. So I think it's a narration of this episode, but also more. So, So yeah, stay tuned for that.
So I think on a couple of notes talking about whether or not he's Jedi or Sith, I think one of the things to look at is for our touch points, form of reference. We talked about kind of the Japanese version of a Ronin being separated from his master, not having honor. But the one you could always remember is like when you watch cowboy movies, there were always the hat colors, right? So the black hats were the bad guys, the white hats were the good guys. And then Clint Eastwood always had a hat color that was like in the middle, right? It wasn't really black, wasn't really white. It was maybe brown or gray or something like that, because he was an anomaly. He was a man with honor, but outside of the system. And so that's kind of where you have this character fitting. And if you gave him any color lightsaber other than red, it could be whatever. It could be he's a Jedi, and so you had to give him a red lightsaber to put him into that gray area, because his actions don't speak to being a Sith, right? He doesn't come in and try and domineer or steal her place, or he's there to hunt her. That's his whole mission. And you see that he ends up saving the town, but it's not because that's what his goal was.
Yeah, and that also, I mean, having a character like that, it creates a more interesting story, right? Because if he were just a Sith or just a Jedi, it would be maybe a little bit more predictable. But because we didn't really know who he was or what his deal was, you know, why is he so laid back when the town is clearly in danger and he has clearly been set up as, you know, this warrior character. So yeah, I really, I think Star Wars is definitely exploring that type of character more over these last few years. And so it was very interesting to see that type of character, again, you know, which is part of the Japanese culture and history and mythos, to show up here in Star Wars the way that it did.
Yeah, and I think these characters are so necessary. Even when we have a Jedi, we want to know, we want to see the layers behind them and what makes them tick. And I mean, if they're just you know, they're just always just kind of robotic in their pursuit of good, or even the Sith robotic in their pursuit of bad. I mean, it can be a good moral story, you know, good and evil, but we don't relate to it in the same way as we see a character who's flawed in the same way that I am, and you know, to struggle with some of the moral dilemmas that they do. And you know, I'm not sure I entirely related to Ronin by any means, but you know, but that kind of a character who's mysterious and somewhat in between, and you can't just put him in a box, is very interesting to see how they play out and what the story does with them. Any other final thoughts on the Duel?
We didn't talk much about the wind, but wind and the use of the wind in general is very Kurosawa. And I mean, we've seen that now in The Mandalorian, right? In that wonderful, what was it called? The Village, or what was that Ahsoka episode called? Do you remember?
Was it the Jedi? I think it was just the Jedi.
The Jedi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in that episode, we saw that also, right? With Ahsoka just kind of coming in the wind, just flapping her garment around. And the wind is very important also in Kurosawa films.
And the flags, that was always something that he really liked, the banners and flags. And you see that a couple of spots in here where the banners and flags play a pretty prominent spot.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I think I would add, we might have mentioned it, but not explicitly, was episode 4 of season 1 of The Mandalorian, The Sanctuary, is also a homage to, I think more explicitly, the Seven Samurai story. So so these stories have been kind of brought in various ways into Star Wars storytelling, and they're doing a really good job with it.
But I do have to say, if you like Star Wars and you liked this episode, do go watch Kurosawa films, because they are really, the Seven Samurai is fantastic. Oh my gosh, the Hidden Fortress. The name wasn't coming to. The Hidden Fortress is so good, and you really do see Star Wars in it. But then also Yojimbo and Sanjuro. If you want the winners, look for the films that have Toshiro Mifune in them, because that was Kurosawa's favorite samurai guy. It was like his go-to samurai guy, and the guy had a lot of range. Like, he could do everything from the crazy buffoon in the Seven Samurai to the very serious Solo, and then also to the Lord Obeying samurai. He had a full gamut of what he could do as a samurai, for especially for Kurosawa.
Yeah, stick that in my list of to watch movies. So before we wrap up, we do have one listener email feedback that we want to get to. And this was from Jeff Hacker via email. And he says, "Hello there. I just listened to the Jango Fett podcast and wanted to share the information and a theory about Slave One that I recently had heard. From legends, as y'all discussed, Jango was raised by Jaster Muriel after Jango's parents were killed by Death Watch. Eventually, Jango became Mandalore after Jaster's death, and he was later betrayed and sold into slavery after killing several Jedi. He eventually escaped and later stole the Fire Spray class ship and named it Slave One. The remnants of Death Watch were also eventually defeated, and Jango left his title and the troubles of Mandalore behind. The theory I've heard is that Jango named it based on his experience. My expansion on this is, after the death of Jaster and his enslavement, Jango felt no attachments to his former life, as he would have been held down or enslaved by it. He became his own man and eventually was recruited to be one of the clone template, or to be the clone template and make his way in the universe. I am also curious if y'all have read the Republic Commando Legends series, which has great Mando stuff, and the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy. I just finished rereading the Commando series in a book club and am about to read the Bounty Hunters War trilogy to get ready for the Book of Boba Fett. I have read them before, but it's been a while. Anyways, I continue to enjoy the podcast and look forward to hearing your thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett. Oya Mando, and may the Force be with you." So
thank you so much. This was a
Angela
delight to read. No, I had not heard that theory. I have not read that series, and so that was all new info to me. But I definitely, I'm the one who said, man, I've never liked how his ship was called Slave One, but now that I've heard that theory, I can appreciate it. So
yeah, that's a better way to, I think, look at that name for sure. And I also personally have not read the Republic Commando series, but I have read there are a number of books that I'm blanking on her name. I think it's either Karen Travis or Kathy Travis. I'm blanking on the author. She wrote those books and really developed the Mandalorian culture before Disney purchased Lucasfilm and kind of recreated the Mandalorians as we see in the Clone Wars. But she also wrote a number of books in the in one of the series after the New Jedi Order, Legacy of the Force. And in those books, she also talks a lot about Boba Fett and goes back to Mandalore. And so she reveals a lot of the culture through those as well. So I have read those, and I've gotten a bit of the Mandalorian culture from Legends, but the Republic Commando series I know gets really into it, and I just haven't had the time to read those, and they're also on my to-do list. I'm never going to get through them all. Never, but it's on my list. So thanks for the email. Thanks for listening. And of course, we are excited to talk about the Book of Boba Fett come December. So stay tuned for that. Mm-hmm. And that concludes things for us this evening. Listeners, of course, we want to know what you thought of the duel. And please let us know by commenting on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can tweet us at SQPN, and you can send any of your feedback or comments to our email at starwars@sqpn.com. And we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible to create the Secrets of Star Wars, including Mary B, Zipporah T, Tim S, Christopher H, and Lynn L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest. And you can join them by going to sqpn.com/give. Also, please make sure you are subscribed to the show if you are not already. You can find the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast player. And you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the SQPN YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notifications for new episodes. And you can find all of our previous episodes by going to sqpn.com/Star Wars. And so we will be back next week as we will take a deeper look into the next episode of Star Wars Visions, Tatooine Rhapsody. So until next time, Thomas and Herho, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
It's been great.
And Angela Cialana, thank you for joining us as well.
Now that we're doing visions, I'm going to practice my Japanese, so arigato gozaimasu. I'll try better. I'll get better. If we have any Japanese listeners, I would love to hear your feedback.
Yes, we would.
Arigato gozaimasu.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.